Good morning. This is Ron. It is Tuesday, May the 29th. Welcome to Story Time. And thank you. And this is Ron, your host. Certainly, maybe lovable, well, definitely lovable, but not harmless, and definitely not a fuzzball, and also the only conservative in the United States of America today. So what I was thinking about today was my foster parents. My foster parents was, I didn't know it at the time, my first encounter with socialists and socialism, particularly my foster mother. She basically ran the household. She was the one that made set the tone in the household, and foster father just went along with it. Provided he worked and provided psychological support to his wife, and so we were basically everybody was under her rules. And one of the ways that you knew that she was a socialist later on, anyways, I knew looking back, was that she hated this country. She lived here in the United States. They came from Holland, and they got here in 1960, and they were basically refugees. Holland and most of Europe, I think by 1960, was still pretty much a relatively an economic basket case from World War II. And so they came here as pretty much economic refugees. The only words they knew in English were Coca Cola. And we got hooked up with them in 1966 and spent most of our childhood, me and my sister, living in this home. So that was one of the ways you knew that she was socialistic, is she hated this country. She hated not just the politics, but the culture of this country. And a demonstration of that is I got involved in various sporting programs. One of them was Pop Warner football. And so I'd have my practice gear on, or I'd have my game gear on, the shoulder pads, the whole bit. And my foster parents or foster mother didn't want to be in the same room with me, literally. She said, I'm not going to be in the same room with him while he's wearing that. She called her a monkey suit while he's wearing that monkey suit. And because football is one of the symbols of America and Americanism and American culture. And she hated this country. There was many times when you did something, she'd say, "Oh, that's so American," with a dirty look on her face and whatnot. Another one of the other ways that you knew that she was socialistic was that she had a spy. She ran the whole house basically like it was a socialist regime. But one of the kids was had the job of being a snitch, the family snitch. It was her job to keep an eye on all the other kids and then report back to the parents as to what these kids are doing or not doing. In return for which, this child got special treatment, got special favors and whatnot, which created a lot of resentment with the other kids, but they didn't care. We heard a lot of "this is our house," which is kind of ironic for a socialist, but on the one hand, because of property issues, but on the other hand, the power of it was the point. Hey, we're in charge. We have the power. You do what we tell you to do. They used to complain a lot about, why do we have to make you do XYZ? Why can't you, um, do these things on your own? And so that was another giveaway. One of the biggest dead giveaways, though, was when my sister came home from school one day, and this is seventh grade, and was told that she was going to have to give up 4 or 5 of her friends because our foster mother's daughter was jealous of her, of the fact that my sister had more friends than she did. And so, in order to make things even, to make things fair, my foster mother told my sister she's going to have to give up 4 or 5 of her friends. And my sister, of course, was distraught. You can imagine, what kind of psychological torment that's got to put you in if you're told by somebody you've got to go back to school the next day and tell four or five pick four or five kids at random and tell them I can't be your friend anymore. I mean, it's just got to be devastating. But she had this obsession with fairness. Everything had to be fair. Everything had to be even, and and just obsessions with power. And she treated everything and every situation was a capitalist plot to separate her from her money. So both of them were the cheapest people on the face of the earth. But it wasn't they weren't cheap because they were trying to save for retirement or because they were trying to get the best value they could. But again, because they assumed that everybody in the United States of America was just in on some capitalist plot to separate them from their money. And that's where I ended up bearing the brunt of this, where I suffered an injury in baseball, playing baseball, and my foster mother basically let me bleed for 3 days because she didn't want to go to the doctor because, again, going to the doctor is just another capitalist plot to separate her from her money. And then finally, when I looked like I was about to die, that's when she went ahead and got in touch with the doctor, and I ended up spending 2 weeks in the hospital that I shouldn't have had to spend because of her socialistic bullshit. Because she was a shit bird. One of the worst person I've ever met in my fucking life. And so, anyways, and I say this in part because you have, again, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity that say, oh, well, I know these people. I know exactly how they think and they act. Rush Limbaugh says, I know them like every square inch of my glorious naked body. Hogwash. He doesn't know crap. I know him because I lived with it. So does, again, and I've read from his book and will continue to read from his book, and that's David Horowitz, who was born into a lefty family and went along with the lefty program for a number of decades and finally ended up having second thoughts about it and eventually separated from the left and became a conservative and then wrote what's called what he calls the Black Book of the American left. Excuse me. So, um, that's yeah. So I've seen socialism, although I didn't know it at the time, up close and personal, and I don't particularly like it. The other thing I wanted to say along these lines was the cultural aspects of socialism and the cultural aspects of capitalism. That there's more to socialism and capitalism than how you vote. Okay, that it's capitalism and socialism are lifestyles, and that's where going back to my foster mother. She was more of a true socialist than a lot of the people in this country because she lived it, or as much as she possibly could. She lived the lifestyle, and one of the examples of that, of living the lifestyle and having a socialist or capitalist mindset, is illustrated by a situation that I experienced in a parking situation. I parked my car in a particular place, and I've told this on my podcast before, that there was a guy that came up to me and said, "Hey, I've got a moving van coming in, and your cars might, looks like it might be in the way, and I don't want to hit it, and all this other stuff." And I said, I didn't feel like moving the car, and I thought he has plenty of room. I said, no, it looks, everything looks fine. Don't worry about it. So what he did is he produced a $20 bill because he thought about it for a minute. Then he produces a $20 bill and he says, "Here, I'll give you $20 if you move your car." And I said, "Yes, sir. Where do you want me to move it to?" But immediately it occurred to me, ding, that this is capitalist lifestyle. The idea of getting into a situation where you're negotiating with people and that you're getting into issues of respect. It's not just the money and what I can do with the money, but the idea of having respect for another human being and having respect for their individuality. Rather than getting into a socialist would have gone ahead and gotten hostile. Because for the socialist, it's a power issue. It's about how can I make this person do what I want. And so that's one of the things that people need to think about when they regard themselves as capitalist. And if you're conservative, you're capitalist. And capitalism fundamentally does mean, as Ayn Rand uh, did discover, individualist, that you have respect for the individual, and that you're not going to collectivize everything, and also that you're going to have respect for them by negotiating with people. That's what a lot of capitalism is all about, is respecting people's time and respecting people as something of value. And so you may negotiate with them in terms of, it might be money, it might be trades of some sort. You do this for me, I'll do that for you, kind of a situation. So whereas in socialism, it's always going to come down to power. It's always going to come down to how can I force this person? Life becomes an endless chess game where you stop and think about, well, okay, if I say this to him, he's going to say such and such in return. If I do this to him, he's going to do such and such in return. So you kind of analyze the situation, look at it as though it's a chessboard, and you get chess moves, and who is it that's going to ultimately win in the end, rather than saying, okay, this is, I need something, I respect this person's time, I respect this person as an individual, so I'll go ahead and negotiate with them so that we have, the left talks a lot of times about win win situations, but that's impossible to do in socialism because everything is based on power. Whereas in capitalism, things are based on respect, respecting other people, and again, negotiating and providing something of value. In the parking lot example, it was win-win because he got what he wanted. He got me to move my car. I got what I wanted. I got $20. And beyond that, or more fundamentally, I got respect. That $20 is a symbol of respect. So there was a material reward, but there was also a psychological reward for going ahead and um, engaging in this negotiation and um, engaging in and completing this negotiation. So, again, that's something that people need to think about. If you're conservative, it's not just enough to say, I'm conservative because I voted conservative. I voted for the right propositions. I voted for the right candidates. It's more than that, it's a lifestyle. You can't call yourself conservative if you vote for a conservative candidate. You listen to Rush Limbaugh, but on the other hand, you go out and live a left wing lifestyle. The music that you listen to, or the way you dress, the way if you're a person that's, for instance, if you're promiscuous, if you're 18 to 25 years old, and you're a promiscuous person, whether it's man or woman, you go out every weekend and you're looking to get laid every weekend, you're not conservative. I don't care how you vote. Okay, because being conservative in life is about, again, objectivity. It's about how you act. It's not about how you identify. The left has conned everybody into believing that life is about what you identify. You identify you're left, then you're left, no matter how you act. If you identify as a woman, even though you're a man, then you're a woman. No, you are what you are. You are how you act. You are what your genes say you are. If you have the biological your equipment for a man, and you're born that way, you're a man. Until such time as perhaps you go through a sex change, and then you might be changed into a woman. But until then, you're a man. Even you can say you're a woman, but you're not. It's the same thing with that lady that claims she was black. Why? Because she identified as black. No, you're white, period. And if you have any doubts about that, simple way to find out, DNA test. So you are who or what you are based on reality. And part of that reality is how you act, especially socio-politically. You're not a conservative if you're out trying to get laid every weekend and you're out smoking dope and engaging in other types of, let's say, vicious behavior. In other words, routinely engaging in vice, um, which I knew people in that I worked with. One of the first jobs I had at a high school was telemarketing, and a lot of the people there were vicious, and I don't mean mean. They were fairly pleasant, smiling and seemed joking and having a good time. But I mean vicious as in consistently and constantly engaged in vice. They were consorting with prostitutes. They were engaged in drug dealing, in drug using, all kinds of different drugs, anywhere from marijuana to acid and illegal drugs I'm talking about. And, of course, if they got a headache, they had aspirin or whatever. But primarily illegal drugs, cocaine and cross tops and the whole spectrum of illegal drugs. So again, they were constantly engaged in vice, and so were therefore vicious. They cannot, I don't care how they voted at the time, uh, consider themselves conservative. Okay, they're socialistic, and that's that. They might be able to consider themselves libertarian, but they certainly cannot consider themselves conservative. So again, so how you are politically is also about um, what lifestyle you live, and you have to remember that and take a look at your lifestyle, and maybe there's some things you need to change. Okay, so when I come back, I'm going to be reading a little bit from Rush Limbaugh's 1993 interview with Playboy magazine. Okay, thank you very much, and I'm back. And so I've been reading from this Playboy interview of Rush Limbaugh from 1993 and critiquing it and pointing out what things Mr. Limbaugh has been missing. Same kind of ideas I've been doing with Ayn Rand. Because again, one of the ways of defeating the left is by simply listening. Listen to what the left is saying. A lot of times you may think that the left is making certain accusations, and they're not. They're simply baiting you into reacting, and they can do that by just using tone of voice. They can use certain loaded phrases or loaded words, but they're not actually. If you actually listen to what they're saying, they're not actually coming out and making an accusation, for instance. Okay, so Limbaugh, the solution to let's start with back here with Playboy. Playboy, let's cover some of the other issues you talk about on your programs. If you're given control of the economic machine, would you do anything with Social Security? And right away, I wanted to say the proper answer to any question that starts out if is generally it's not so. It's just that simple. Well, if you ran into the President of the United States, what would you say to him? It's not going to happen. The President of the United States and I do not run in the same circles. So it's not going to happen. Anything else? That's the proper answer to that question. Because the point of, again, the left is trying to get all of your conversations to be psychologistic in nature, imaginary, and once you get into that realm, anything goes. You can't prove anything, you can't disprove anything, and the left has a tendency to triumph. If you want to win with the left, you've got to keep the conversation as intellectual as you possibly can, unless you're trying to mock the left. If you want to mock the person that you're dealing with, then you might go ahead and wax psychologistic just to poke fun at them. But by and large, you want to keep the conversation intellectual, realistic in nature. So in this particular case, the proper answer by Rush Limbaugh is to simply say, well, I don't have any control over Social Security. Boom. But Limbaugh says the solution to Social Security is to start with a generation not yet born and say it's over at a certain future date. People who are alive today wouldn't stand for that. It's just not a political possibility. I would tell Social Security recipients of the future, don't count on it. It isn't going to be there. This may need to be one of those truly bipartisan things. The only alternative is to institutionalize it formally and honestly. To say it is now a policy of the United States that we are going to pay you X amount for not doing anything when you reach a certain age. But frankly, I don't know what to do about it. It's easy to sit here and theorize when I don't have to face the consequences of whatever I come up with. And the reason he's struggling is because he's looking at this as a purely political issue. But really, what it is not only political, but it's economic. Why do we have Social Security in the first place? Why do we have welfare? Why do we have any of these programs? We didn't always have them. We didn't have them in the 1700s. We didn't have them in the 1800s. Most of the stuff started right around roughly the 1930s. But one of the things is, I would say again, Crowleyism. That the Herbert Crowley was the guy that wrote a book called The Promise of American Life, and he said that the promise of American life is ever increasing prosperity, and the way to achieve that is to get the government to run the economy, and then the government could use its vast resources to manipulate the economy in such a way so as to prevent recessions and depressions and keep the economy going. Now, one of the and we have that situation today. It's called Keynesian economics. And Keynes basically said, we're going to go off the gold standard, the silver standard, and we're going to just make it a paper standard. The dollar around the world will be the reserve currency. They also have something that's called, by the way, the uh, legal tender law, where it is, I don't know if you know, but it's illegal for you to refuse to take dollars, for you to refuse to take paper money. Illegal. So if you try to say, well, I'll sell you X, but you got to give me gold, you're breaking the law. I don't know if it's a felony or a misdemeanor, but you're breaking the law. So uh, when you have a situation like that, what does that do to the economy? If it's a paper economy, and every time the government needs to try and keep us out of a recession or prevent us from getting into a recession, what does it have to do? Print money. What does that mean? It means inflation. It means that your money is worth less, that prices rise. Now, if that's the case, then you got to ask yourself, well, what happens to poor people, that are on the bottom of the economic spectrum? They're making minimum wage or whatever, or even before there was minimum wage. That was also a good excuse for a minimum wage, a floor, because then that way, if you're raising the inflation, you raise the minimum wage so the poor can keep up. The other thing then on the other end is, what about old people that are on a fixed income? What are you going to do if the government is out inflating the money supply? That hurts their purchasing power. The older people are going to be hit hardest, along with the poor, in an inflationary economy. So what do we do about that? Hence, Social Security. So the social safety net. So the first thing that would have to happen if we're going to get rid of Social Security. And what I'm basically saying is that Social Security, welfare, and things of those natures are perfectly rational and reasonable in the context of a Keynesian economic system. In order to get rid of those safety nets, you have to change the economic system. And what we'd have to do is, and I advocate it, go back to the gold standard. In a gold standard economy, your money gains value. That means prices have a tendency to go down, and that means that you don't need social safety nets. Okay, people have to just learn how to save their money. You save your money, and you will do just fine. It also means that you won't need banks, and you won't need Wall Street. If your money has a tendency to gain value without doing anything, what do you need the banks for? What do you need Wall Street? The only people that get involved in that then would be the greedy. And if they get screwed by Wall Street, well, too bad, kind of thing. But the point is, we wouldn't need the social safety nets if we were on a gold standard economy. So that would have to be the first thing to happen. If you want to fundamentally change the economics, of this country, then you have to move to the gold standard. We got to go back to the gold standard. So, all right, back to the article. Playboy, what about health care? Is this a job for private business or is it something the government can and must do? And I want to say about the question is that it's a reasonably straightforward question. It's a fair question. He's asking it positive. He's not trying to lead Mr. Limbaugh to a conclusion that the interviewer has already drawn. Limbaugh, the government can't do it and must not do it. That would only compound or confound it, especially a government of, by, and for a bunch of 60s radical liberals whose charm has gone bad. A bunch of theoreticians who write their solutions to all these weighty social problems in term papers and doctoral theses. Then all of a sudden they find themselves in positions of power. They pant heavily, but when confronted by the awful specter of reality, they find that their theories are worthless. These are pointy headed academicians who have spent time at Oxford thinking they're better people because they care more, feel more, are more concerned and compassionate, and they are devastated when they find out that their good intentions don't amount to a hill of beans when mixed with rotten ideas. That was kind of he punted basically on this issue of healthcare as to whether or not it can or shouldn't. I am preferring the to have a market economy in as far as healthcare is concerned, and although there's people who say, well, what about inequities of wealth? The people that are wealthy are going to have advantages in our society that the non-wealthy are not going to have, and so it's going to be in terms of health care. And yes, they are, and it seems to me that there's just never going to be fair. It's never going to be fair. We're never going to have a health care system that is fair. You're going to have a situation where either the playing field is slanted in favor of people with a lot of money, or it's going to be slanted in favor of people with a lot of power. You look at the situation in England. There's been two small children, 6 months, a year, thereabouts, that have been left to die at the orders of the government of the United Kingdom. The parents had the option of taking, in one case, taking the child to the United States, no cost to the British taxpayer, to seek a remedies for this child's condition. They were told, no, can't do it. We're not going to allow it. In other words, it's illegal. If the parents go anyways, they might come back and find themselves arrested, prosecuted, and very possibly imprisoned. Second case, it was Italy that had a potential solution for a child. And again, the state said, no, you're not going to do it. Why? Theoretically, they want everything to be even, that everybody has the same health care, no matter who it is. The fact of the matter is, we know that people in positions of power in England are never going to face that choice. They're never going to be told by the state that you will not take your children here or there. The Queen of England, if one of her children, grandchildren, great grandchildren is in the same spot these people were, the government isn't going to say to her, I'm sorry, you can't have those children go to the United States or whatever. You're just going to have to watch them, sit around and watch them die. She isn't going to do that, and they're not going to arrest her either. And we all know that. Same thing goes with the prime minister, members of parliament. So what you have is a situation in which the playing field is slanted in favor of the powerful. I'd rather have it being slanted in favor of money because I can always beg, borrow, or steal money, not so power. And also, money is an individual issue. It's not a collective issue. But like I said, you can always beg, borrow, steal money from a practical standpoint, and not so power. So if you don't know somebody powerful, if you're not somebody that's powerful, you're screwed, and that's intolerable. So, anyways, that's how we should have addressed that one. Playboy, let's get back to healthcare. What's wrong with the healthcare system is easy to enunciate. Market forces long ago ceased to be a factor in the cost of medical care at every level. If medical care were priced like every other product, hotel room and airline seat, a ticket to a baseball game, a washer and dryer, to where the people who needed it could afford it or at least finance it reasonably, then there wouldn't be a crisis. I'll illustrate the problem. I went to a doctor 2 years ago, and at the time, I was in the process of straightening out a complication in my health care coverage with my union. God, I cringe when I say my union. Anyway, I went to the doctor and I wanted to pay for it. I said, look, I can give you my credit card. They said, no, give us your Blue Cross. I said, I don't have Blue Cross. They said, do you have some kind of health plan? I said, I just want to pay you cash. Here, let me write you a check. But they had no mechanism to take payment from me. It screwed them up. It confused them. They had to find a nurse to take the check to create a file that they said they had been paid. So there is no sense of commodity, no sense of exchange, no sense of barter, no sense of shopping at all. Competition always ensures quality. It ensures how prices, or at least the lowest price you can have. Once you start controlling all these things at the government level, like Hillary Clinton will, the first thing that goes is quality. We're going to get less care, and it's going to cost everybody more. Sure, it's going to be equally bad for everybody. And again, he's wrong. It's not going to be equal at all. The best care is going to go to the people with the most power. President of the United States, members of Congress, they're always going to get the best care. It's also going to do, what it's also going to do is those people that are well to do are going to be able to cheat the system because they're going to be able to use an underground market and find an underground market, find doctors that are willing to work for them on the side. Because again, if the doctors work in a system, healthcare system, rather than a healthcare market, the doctors are not going to be able to charge what they want to charge. They're only going to be able to charge what they're allowed to charge. Well, that may or may not help them pay off the loans for school. It may or may not help them get a new car, a house, etc. And if it doesn't, they're going to be looking for extra income. And one of the easiest ways for them to get extra income is to work on the side, to work in an underground market where they get paid cash, probably by rich and powerful people. And so those people will always get better care. The other thing is that what had happened in this country is that we started out with doctors. You went to a doctor the same way you go to a dentist today. You see, doctors had offices, their own office. So you go to the doctor, you paid them when you were done, etc. Then Congress created the HMOs, the health maintenance organizations, which is basically insurance companies. Insurance companies pitched the idea of taking over the healthcare market because, well, first of all, it's more profitable for them, but the idea it appeals to doctors because the doctors don't have to spend any time collecting bills, and secondly because what they pitched it to Congress as, we will lower health care costs. Why were health care costs going up? Because of Medicare. Medicare is the federal government saying we're going to pay for the medical expenses, at least part of them, that seniors run up. So if you're a doctor or you're a hospital and you have a bill and you're going to give it to the federal government, which you know has a 2 or 3 or 4 trillion dollar budget, sky's the limit. There's no market forces to keep you in check. Normally, you're not going to charge any more than people are willing to pay. What is the government going to pay? Well, you have to go out and charge. You can charge the government anything. So you're in a situation where the government can very easily get ripped off. The prices will continue to skyrocket simply because the government will pay whatever it is that the hospitals and the doctors charge. And or you have a situation where the government decides, well, we're going to arbitrarily, in order to keep costs under control, cap prices. We'll cap them. And if it's reasonable or unreasonable, the doctors and the hospitals are going to look for ways to recoup their expenses. Prices are going to again have a tendency to go up as they do this. So Um, it seems to me again that the first thing that needs to be done is get rid of the HMOs, get the insurance companies out of this business, restore a full market situation where doctors and patients can be the ones to decide. I can go shopping, go to a doctor and say, "What do you charge for a checkup?" And then go to the next doctor and find out the one that's most reasonable in terms of costs. And that is what's going to help to keep costs under control. If you turn it over to the government, it's just going to go, prices are just going to go through the roof. Also, not only because of the fact that the government is going to pay because the government's paying, so they're going to necessarily inflate the price. But if I go to the doctor and I say, well, I'm thinking about getting an MRI, and the doctor says, well, it'll cost $5,000. I may say, you know what, let's go with an X-ray instead. But if I have an HMO and I have the insurance company that's paying for it, or I'm having the government pay for it because I'm on Medicare, then I want what I think is the best, which I'm going to assume is going to be the most expensive. I'm going to demand the MRI instead of a simple um, X-ray. So that's another area is that people's expectations change. They feel they're paying into the system, they're paying taxes, or they're paying insurance premiums, and I expect more. I expect to get maximum amount for my money because after all, that's what insurance companies promise you. You pay a premium, we'll take care of your health care. And the whole way that the HMOs were supposed to be keeping a lid on costs was by telling people no. That you would go to a doctor and say, I need, you find out you have some kind of problem or issue, and so you then are referred to a specialist, and the HMO is going to determine whether or not you even get to see the specialist. So they may say, no, you can't. I'm sorry. It's too expensive. It's not worth it. Or you get to see a specialist who recommends a certain treatment, and the HMO says, no, you can't have that treatment. It's too expensive. It's speculative. We're not going to bother with it. Well, if you're a person that feels I've paid for my health care ahead of time, I've been paying premiums for God knows how long, and now that I want something out of my HMO, I want them to start paying me, they say no, you're outraged. You're furious. And we've seen that in many instances where HMOs deny care to people. One guy out here in California literally took a shotgun and blew his brains out. He commandeered a part of the freeway, put out these banners and signs for a little while, and then at the very end, stuck a shotgun in his mouth and blew his brains out. Literally on TV, and it was I didn't see it, but I was told that they actually broadcast this, that the news agencies did, which sounds perfectly disgusting. But and again, why? Because he feels he's ripped off. I've been paying into the system. I've been paying into my premiums. I've been a good loyal member, and now you're telling me you're not going to go ahead and provide my health care. Screw you. So guess what happens? The HMOs get intimidated because then after that, of course, there's congressional oversight. There's committee meetings. There's a lot of media attention. And guess what? The HMOs relent and they start saying yes more often. And guess what happens to prices? They continue to rise. So, and what we have here is a situation where instead of recognizing that the experiment has failed and let's go back to where we started, okay, and rethink this whole thing, go back to the drawing board, so to speak, the left wants to go forward because then they think that the next logical step after this, of course, is single payer, having the federal government pick up the tab for everybody's health care, which isn't going to make things cheaper. It's just going to make them more expensive because you're going to have the same issue. The government is going to be intimidated by the voters into saying yes to everything, and the prices will continue to skyrocket. So, and not only that, but in a single payer system, everybody's going to be unionized. All the nurses, all the doctors, all the orderlies, and they're going to be on strike constantly. They're going to be wanting pay raises and increases in pay and benefits constantly. So that's more pressure on prices. So it's just ridiculous. Okay, so that's it for this segment of this little Rush Limbaugh segment. And when I come back, it's going to be to the New York City cab drivers joke book. Okay, thank you very much. And we're at the, let's see, at the reading from the New York City Cab Drivers Joke Book by Jim Peach. What crime did they finally get old King Midas on? Guild by association. A young boy is told by his very puritanical father that he should never have sex with a woman because a woman has teeth in her vagina and might bite off his penis. The years go by, the boy grows up, and one day he decides to get married. On his wedding night, though, he locks himself in the bathroom and refuses to come out. His wife asks him through the locked door what could possibly be wrong. The man calls out, "You have teeth down there." The woman says, "No, I don't. Come on out and you can see for yourself." So the man opens the door and the wife shows him. "You see, there are no teeth there." "Well," says the man, "with gums like that, I can see why not." How can you tell if a Polish man is at a cockfight? He's the one with the duck. How can you tell if an Italian is at a cockfight? He's the one betting on the duck. How can you tell if the mafia is at a cockfight? The duck wins. And with that, this is the end of another episode of Story Time. Thank you very much for joining me. And until next time, have a great day.